So this college football landscape or college athletics landscape, it's so crazy. And the guy who's been on the forefront of reporting and just been on top of it is Ross Dellenger from Yahoo Sports, and he's joining us here on the hotline to break it all down. Ross, good morning, buddy. How you been?
Good. How are you?
Doing well. Yeah, you've been fantastic, man. It's just it's been fun to see you just break it all down and get the information out there. Is it fair to say, and I know you had a column about this, I think at the end of last week, we still don't have clarity with all the things that are happening. Like, it's just more information, yet still a lot of haziness, if you will.
Yeah. I was at SEC spring meetings in Destin. Was able to catch up with some administrators and university presidents and Commissioner Greg Sankey and virtually everybody that usually would have answers didn't, and so there's a lot of unanswered questions. And part of that is kind of expected. They're in the process of kind of writing what's called the long form of the settlement agreement, and they'll be doing that for another few weeks. And so they've agreed on a short form term sheet, you might call it, but it's more like term sheets because this is such a pretty in-depth, broad kind of settlement agreement. But they're doing the long form now. And so there's still an active, somewhat negotiations over what's in the long form and particulars around that. So a lot of unanswered questions that probably won't be fully answered until that long form is complete.
And once that long form is complete, there's still going to be a lot of questions, and this could be evolving. Do we still think the timeline of probably starting this new world is 2025?
Yeah, I would say that that the July, August, whatever the fall semester for 2025 is the goal. It would surprise me if that were to change. The long form will probably be submitted, you would think, sometime in July, and then there's a bunch of processes that then happen. You have an approval process from the judge that includes a 3-month objection period for plaintiffs, so the former players, current players, to object to the settlement. Then there are hearings over those objections. So it's at least 5 months away for actually finalization of this, and maybe 8 months away. But if it gets much further, then you could see that altering the implementation timeline of a new model. I don't expect that, though. I would think that certainly by spring of next year, everything will be finalized, and you'll see an implemented model. Over the course of this process, this finalization process, the details of a new model will come out, and they'll be sorted out, and schools will know a little more answers to some of these questions over the next, I would say, couple months, as soon as they're through with the long form sometime in July.
Is this a Hail Mary, if you will, for the NCAA to get to this point? Because there was always this talk of football breaking away potentially. Is this like the last-ditched effort to keep everything in-house?
Yeah, certainly. One of the big things the settlement does do is, for 10 years, the settlement's duration, it does kind of bind everybody together in the NCAA. So that includes the power conferences. So I think it's seen by many folks as kind of a binding agreement that make sure that everybody stays together for at least 10 years or so. So that's kind of one of the goals for sure.
Talking to Ross Dellenger here on TexAgs Radio. So help me understand some of the reasons that they're talking. Like, why roster limits? Why get rid of walk-ons? I understand that it's about revenue, right? And finding a new source of revenue to be able to pay this. But, like, why is that? And the coaches are obviously completely against it.
Well, I think, that particular thing, it is kind of a complicated one. But when you break it down, it you can kind of understand what they're doing. They're not just immediately saying, no walk-ons, right? It's not just a money saving thing. So I'll start kind of from, because it's kind of like a trickle down. So one of the things in the settlement is to eliminate scholarship caps and restrictions, because it is a restriction on athletes. And there's a thought that it will eventually that restriction will lead to another antitrust lawsuit against the NCAA. So how do you prevent that? You get rid of that, right? You get rid of that restriction. So they're removing the scholarship caps. Each sport has a scholarship cap. Those will be removed, replaced by a roster limit. And each sport will then have a roster limit, and those sports in schools can offer as many scholarships as they want on each team up to the roster limit, whatever that roster limit is by sport. So that, number one, is to eliminate the potential for more antitrust suits over scholarship restrictions. Now, how that impacts sports is kind of the second part of this. How that impacts football specifically and walk-ons is kind of the second part of this. If you are going to have a football roster of what it is now, which is around 120 football players, because of the recruiting environment and the competition in college athletics, you're going to have schools offer all 120 scholarships to their entire roster. And that means a few things. One, that means more expense, right? That's 35, 40 more scholarships right now. And then it also means 40 more scholarships, so a total of 80, because you have to balance out, because of Title IX, the federal law that requires schools to offer equal benefits and opportunities to men and women. You'd have to offer the same amount of additional scholarship for women athletes as well. So you do eliminate a lot of expense if you just shrink the roster to 85 or 90 or 95, whatever it may be, probably in that ballpark, in that realm. So kind of a two-part thing, right? They're eliminating it to try to avoid antitrust, eliminating the scholarship restriction. And when you do that, in order to avoid incurring a lot more expense, upwards of 80 additional scholarships, you shrink the football roster. Now, every sports roster won't be condensed like that. Like baseball is a good example, right? Their baseball programs have around a 32-man roster as far as scholarship players, and 11.7 scholarships. The sport is given 11.7 scholarships to spread over that 32. Well, baseball's roster might be 32, might remain at 32, but a school could spread, have 32 scholarships, basically. Now they would have to, add women's scholarships additionally to that. So it's going to be a sport by sport basis on the roster limit.
That's a great explanation. Thank you for that. So how close do you think we are to seeing sports eliminated at some of these bigger schools? Because revenue's got to come from somewhere. They got to pay for these players, right? So is that coming sooner than people expect?
I think at the highest level, at the major conference, you probably won't see a ton of sports eliminated. You may see sports, especially in the league like the ACC, where they have so many sports. I think they lead the country maybe in the average amount of sports sponsored by school. You may see them drop sports to club sports where you don't offer scholarships. I could see that happening, but a wholesale elimination of sports programs, I don't see that happening at the major conference level to the degree that some believe. I think that athletic administrators will look for other ways to cut expenses, or find untapped revenue streams, ways that don't end in lawsuits, because eliminating sports could potentially end in lawsuits. We've seen that in the past. So look for ways that for athletic administrators to specifically try to find untapped revenue, which we've seen already, whether it's naming rights stuff or corporate sponsors on fields. That's probably going to be allowed going forward. More so, I think you'll see those things, and then of course the reduction in staff and salaries, as we've actually seen there at Texas A&M.
So how will collectives evolve? Because they're not going anywhere, right? Like they're still going to be around. There's still going to be NIL. Obviously, that's why we're here now. How do you think it'll be evolved? How it will, the evolution of it, if you will.
Yeah, I plenty of people think that collectives will just kind of poof go away with this new model, and they say that's not the case. The collectives themselves, I think that they, I think that there's an evolution going on with collectives. I had a story on this at Yahoo last week about the next evolution of NIL collectives, and I think it is them turning into marketing agencies, and that marketing agency could, in a new model, be permitted to distribute funds to athletes outside of the university, third party NIL that actually don't count toward a school's cap. So I think they want to exist in that world. The issue with that for them is, a lot of the deals now that we see collective strike, some consider fake or phony NIL. I think in the future, the way this settlement is written in this new model will be is you'll have a new enforcement arm that is going to be scrutinizing NIL deals maybe more than ever. And I think true NIL is a word you hear used with this new model. And any enforcement arm will include like a clearinghouse where this clearinghouse is supposed to, approve these true NIL deals, make sure that they're true NIL deal for fair market value. It seems like a difficult thing to do, but college leaders are pretty convinced that this will be something they can do moving forward, and it is going to be of interest, I would say, to collectives and marketing agencies to pay attention to how that works. But there's no doubt that the collectives are not immediately disappearing.
Talking to Ross Dellenger here on TexAgs Radio. Ross, have you had any conversations with Trev Albert since he took over at A&M? One of the reasons they hired him was because he could see the future coming and he had a plan laid out. What do you think about the job he can do here at A&M?
Yeah, I caught up with Trev a couple times in Destin at spring meetings. We discussed all the things we're talking about here. Just the issues that come with the added expense of $20 to $25 million, and that's just the cap. That doesn't even include a lot of the additional scholarships that schools will add for baseball, softball, and whatever else. So we discussed how to go about that, and as he put it, college athletics has a not a revenue problem, but a spending problem. And I think the first way to stop that is to slow spending and reduce expenses. And I think we see him doing that, already there. And Trev certainly has a good reputation among his peers, I think, for managing an athletic department. And I think he's one of the ADs that, especially given what already he's done there, is going to lay more of a path for potentially for how we might see other athletic departments handle all this.
I know you write a lot about the business of the college athletics, but what do you think about the Mike Elko era here at Texas A&M and what he might be able to do?
Yeah, I got to catch up with Mike at SEC spring meetings as well. He did just an incredible job at Duke, and I think if you can do that kind of work that quickly at Duke, get them going like he did, there'd be no reason to think that Mike Elko can't do that at Texas A&M, where you have certainly more resources and you're in a more kind of fertile recruiting ground, and you're in the SEC where down the line here you're going to have some significant increases in revenue and in conference distribution. So it's all kind of lined up there. Feels like it's been that A&M has been resource wise and footprint wise in a great position, and just hasn't gotten quite over that hump. And I don't know if he's the guy to do it, but certainly he did it good enough at his last stop that you would think he could.
Conference realignment, always around June, July, becomes a hot topic. Do you think we find out anything this summer when it comes to Florida State, Clemson, and whatnot?
I hope not. I hope to get a summer where I don't have to deal with realignment. It's been like 3 of the last 3 years in the summers of realignment. So I hope they can wait a little bit, but I don't know. I think it happening this summer would be a little quick, but I don't put it past them to make a move there. It would strike me as a surprise if they got out, free of charge, right? This thing feels like it's going to end in one of two ways. Either they go to court and play it out in court, and the judge decides how much they would owe to leave, or they settle in they're given some kind of settlement, or they agree to some kind of settlement the ACC does with either Florida State or Clemson or both to leave. So it would be a pretty stiff price, I think, and that's probably a tough one to swallow, which is why we could see it drag on a little bit.
Ross, last thing for you. For the average college football fan that kind of didn't like the direction that it was going the last few years with NIL, with transfers and whatnot, this new season that we're going to be entering next year, hopefully, should they feel better about the direction of college athletics because of the framework that's being placed?
Well, I think there's a thought, I think fans probably get frustrated most with the transfer portal and the movement of players. That is not addressed in the settlement, but enough is that you could see schools sign agreements and contracts with athletes that they're now paying. And those agreements could be multi-year. So in a sense, we could see the rate of player movement, I think, decreased a little bit and be limited because of those potential contracts. Now, athletes would have to agree to these contracts. But if that does happen, I think that's certainly a positive for many fans.
Ross, great work, man. Thanks so much. Hope to see you at SEC Media Days here in about 45 days.
Yep. Thanks.
Thanks, man. Ross Dellenger, great work there at Yahoo. Appreciate his time.